this time, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Only just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up tonight. We gonna light it up tonight. We gonna light it up just like the sunrise. We gonna light it up now.
Hello, hello. After a long vacation, I think it's been about 3 weeks since we were live, coming to you live from Virginia and taking your questions live, answering all your HVAC questions. So if you have any questions that if you stump me, that's not hard to do. So sometimes we are joined by other pros in the chat. So feel free to drop any questions in there. Hello to Gary. If you are joining us tonight, just like Gary said hello, please drop a hello and where you're located. And we appreciate having you. Got a couple of stories I want to share with you guys tonight. But before I jump into all of that, let me just go through my normal housekeeping matters. And that is, if you are catching this stream, feel free to, if you get any value out of this, to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you happen to catch this on a podcast on one of the major platforms, please leave us a review. That does help with the growth of the show. That said, I want to start out tonight's show by saying thank you. Thank you to all of you that are watching this. If you happen to catch this, we hit 150,000 subscribers this week. And for that, I am truly grateful. When I first started doing this YouTube channel, it was more of a hobby. It was also something that I used to promote our heating and air business here in Virginia. It was something that I thought that there's enough people in our industry that make us all look bad, that maybe I could do a few things to make the industry look good. And hopefully you have felt that. Hopefully you've noticed that's always been the goal here. And I just want to say, thank you. Thank you for all of your support. Those of you that have hit that subscribe button and continue to watch our content. I'm always open to suggestions. So if you do have anything specific you want us to cover, feel free to, do that. Hello to Steve from Dayton, Ohio, Austin from Stafford, Virginia. So right here in Virginia. And of course, Brian, who has joined us before out of Central California. So good to see all of you folks. And thank you for joining us. Colton says, hey there, I work for Johnstone Supply. Horrible company, by the way. That's actually, I work for Johnstone as well. I help do some of their training here in Virginia. My purchasing department said we don't have any mobile home matchup for a Bosch heat pump. Do you know anything about how I could match a Bosch heat pump? Well, even if it's not an HRI match, if you're doing one of the 1.0 models, and forgive me on the verbiage, that's what we used to call it when the Bosch first came out. As long as it's got a TXV on the coil and the capacity matches and the refrigerant matches, right? Because there's so many freaking refrigerants now. But as long as all of that matches, you could do, we did an Aspen coil on a few of them. We did a Mortex coil on a few of them, but my favorite, if the dimensions would allow, and it's only because we never had any problems. And that was when we would do an ADP coil. So I think, I can't, all the Johnstones offer something different. So depending on those brands, you may not offer all of those brands, but I think just about all of them offer the Aspen coils. So check those out if you haven't. He mentioned something about aluminum coils are needed. All the Bosch cares about is that temperature coming back, that saturation temperature. It will ramp up and down. If the temperature coming back is high, it will ramp up. If it's low, it'll ramp down. And that's really all it cares about. It's looking at that pressure coming back from the evaporator coil, and that's what makes it ramp up and down. It's got a transducer in there that measures that and then will operate accordingly. So now if you're looking for something that is definitely an AHRI match, then you're going to have to do some hunting. You're going to have to go on AHRI's directory, and I'm not saying they don't exist. I was just always upfront with my customers. Hey, this is mismatched equipment. It's going to work. I've done it before. I'm confident in that, and I will warranty it. But you know, I can't guarantee it's going to be an HRI match or something like that. So I know that's probably cuss words these days. What I'm saying right now is not okay, but you know, 9 times out of 10, I want good AHRI matched equipment. I want everything to be covered under warranty from the manufacturers, but we all know that mobile home electric furnaces are a whole nother animal. We do Aspen coil with Coleman EBE 10. If you've got the Coleman stuff, you might be able to look at the Hisense lineup as well. Hisense has a technology very similar to Bosch's, meaning you can do an outdoor unit that will match with that coil as well. So check them out. If you guys don't currently offer Hisense, I know that more and more Johnstones, as time keeps going on, they keep picking them up. So Philip says hello to Philip. Good to see you. Steve says here in Dayton, we got more snow than I can remember, and my heat pump outside unit was covered in snow and ice. No bueno. Definitely want to get that off of there if you can. You know, especially if you're using it, if it's running and you're getting heat off of it, we want to get that thawed off of there. I had a mini split, the same thing. I have a mini split on my little office that we're building for YouTube stuff, in my backyard. And I've got a little Daikin Aurora mini split. Daikin's a sponsor on our channel. So just so I don't get in trouble with the FTC, I just want to disclose that. But I've got a Daikin Aurora mini split out there, and the ice was starting to build up on the coil. So I had to get that off of there. I don't know if any of you have ever had to do that. What your method of doing that is. I've seen different folks use heat guns or all kinds of different things, but the thing I've found that's the easiest thing to do is, especially you want to turn the unit off because you don't want the head pressure to get too high, but is get some hot water. Just, you don't even have to boil it or anything. Just, you know, turn on your tap, get it as hot as you can, put your pot under there and throw it on that ice and thaw it down, and at least enough to get some good airflow in there. And you know, that's that is my opinion. I don't want to be sued or anything if you ruin something. Don't do that unless you know what you're doing. How about that? So Henry says, if you work at Johnstone, you should know any air handler or furnace will match up with a Bosch. Well, that's not true. It's not any air handler or furnace. So the capacity has to match. So if we're doing a 3-ton Bosch, I don't want to be pairing that with a 1.5 tons. Well, let me rephrase, because the 3 can be programmed. If I'm doing a 5-ton Bosch, I don't want to pair it with a 1.5 tons. I do want the refrigerants to match. And then that indoor coil has to have a TXV. So it's not any air handler or furnace. You want all of those things to match. And then other than that, you're correct. Bosch doesn't really care what the brand is of the coil on the other end. But I will say this, a lot of these mismatched things we used to do with Bosch and Hisense and some of these other pieces of equipment that have that technology, I wonder where that's going to go with these new refrigerants with that sensor. Are we going to see electric furnaces with the ability of having some sort of sensor? And if so, like Goodman has their Dragonfly board so it can operate with a gas furnace, and give you that mitigation with those A2L refrigerants. And for those of you that don't know, if you're a homeowner and you're not up to speed on this, the new refrigerants, because they're mildly flammable, have to go into a mitigation mode if that new sensor that they're putting in all the A2L refrigerant systems, if it senses a leak, if it senses refrigerant in there, it will bring the indoor fan motor on. So it'll be interesting to see with some of these matchups that we see in mobile home furnaces how that will go, because that is that's something that you're going to have to meet code either way, right? So NK, welcome to the show, says thoughts on adding an additional return to the other side of a furnace. I have 100,000 BTU unit with only a 16 by 25 return inlet. Some furnaces, depending on your uh your instructions, is what you should be reading, they will tell you that if you're going to do a side outlet, if you're not going to come out the butt end of that furnace, forgive me for the verbiage, but the normal end, if you're going to set it at, like, for example, in an upright position and cut the side out, that you have to cut out more than one side to get proper airflow across that. So I would defer you to your instructions. You said the furnace is in a semi-finished basement. Yeah, I would check out the instructions. Most brands, just pull up the model number and just search instructions. And most brands, not all, some of them for whatever reason want to put everything under lock and key, but most brands you should be able to find what you're looking for and get that answer. Brian says, are Linux boards going out on split systems on any of you folks here in the chat? I know of about 5 homes personally. Any thoughts? Interesting. Yeah, I'd love to hear if anybody out there has anything to say on that as well. SFL, welcome to the show, says Fran here. And I always forget to call you Fran. So if I call you SFL again, I apologize. They are pushing geothermal heating and cooling a lot more now. Yeah, there was a span of about 5 years here local to me where there were some companies that were basically built, I don't want to say from the ground up, but from nothing to something pretty quick, on geothermal systems back when I believe Obama's administration put in those um, incentives for geothermal systems. There were some big incentives. You could put in a $40,000 system and get 20 or 30,000 of it in incentives, and so folks were like, "Well, this is a no brainer." Um, and so I remember those companies popping up. I don't see as many of them now, but um, it's definitely there. It's a good technology. Although I think the air to air technology and especially the air to water technology is definitely catching up from an efficiency standpoint. And it's not so much that they're as efficient, but the investment on some of those systems, I see a lot of homeowners making the decision to maybe avoid something that's going to cost 40 or 50 grand. I mean, that was 40 grand back then. So who knows what they're charging now to put these systems in, Lord knows. If any of you have gotten a quote on a full install on a geothermal system lately, I'd love to hear that, because I have not. I haven't helped anybody on our website anytime recently, especially with the way everything has just jumped in price in the last 3 to 4 years. And I'd be curious to hear what some of these companies are charging, because if they were charging 40,000 10, 15 years ago to put a system in, put the loops in the ground and ductwork and everything, I can't imagine what they're charging now. I mean, I bet some of those systems, I bet there's companies out there probably charging close to $100,000. I mean, it's just crazy. Colton says, if a customer wants a heat pump split system in a mobile home application, what should I offer? We sell Aspen, Revolve, and Coleman electric furnaces. I think you just answered your question there. I would offer definitely a heat pump. I've told the story multiple times where I had a lady that she had another company come in and they were trying to get her. Hold on one second. I'm going to see. Let's see. Let's switch. Okay, there we go. It's taken up. My fat face is big enough, and the words at the bottom were really taking up a lot of real estate on the screen. So, but I had a lady that we ended up putting in an electric furnace. You have to do something high static if it's a mobile home setup, because the ductwork, it's not set up to just put any old air handler in there. So, you go and put an electric furnace, something made for high static and downflow, obviously, in most cases. And just putting in a heat pump. So we had customers that would do like a Goodman or even we never did Coleman, but a Coleman, so maybe some budget friendly option that can pair with that coil. And, you got your furnace there, and just switching to heat pump alone, where they're not burning heat strips, set it up like a normal heat pump system, and customers were saving a ton of money. And when I say a ton, I mean hundreds of dollars per month in the winter time. When they were going straight electric heat strips, 15 kW heat kit in that electric furnace, and then they just go to just a simple single stage cheap heat pump on mild days, if nothing else, they were saving lots of money on that front. But then we started doing those Bosches when they came out with that non-communicating inverter technology. And I remember a lady hugging me. Her electric bill went from over $600 a month to just over $100 a month. We were saving her almost $500 per month on her electric bill. And I remember my price was a little higher than the other guy. And she made it back within, I think it was 3 months. She was going to do a cheap, heat pump with air handler. And I explained to her that air handlers are not meant for high static and blah, blah, blah. Talked her in, I would always tell folks, look, I'm giving you good advice here. Even if you don't hire me, take my advice. You know what I mean? Like, please don't put a air handler in here that's not meant for high static, especially a variable speed, constant CFM motor that is just going, it's going to sound like a wind turbine trying to push through those small ducts. It's not meant for that. And it's not going to, it's just going to power through that high static application. So anyway, I'm rambling at this point on that front, but yeah, the chat is hopping tonight. And thank you guys again. I do have a quick announcement that I will be announcing in about 10 minutes. So stick around for a big announcement for next week's show. I think some of you that like some free stuff might love to hear that. And so we'll announce that in about 10 minutes or so, what we've got coming up for you guys. Philip says, if you want, I can provide an update feedback on the Daikin Atmosphere R32 with the Daikin 1 Touch. Well, sure, pal. I'd love to hear that. I know a lot of folks, or I've heard of a lot of folks doing the Daikin 1s with mini splits, but I have not personally heard a lot of feedback about it. So I'd love to hear about that. Randy says, have you ever heard of air temp condensers being paired with Miller electric furnaces, or is it that a mismatch system? Because that's how my neighbors is set up. So those are both Nordyne or Nortec or whatever they're called now, products. And so chances are, if there was going to be a match with an electric furnace, it would probably be that one. Now, I'm not a fan of Nordyne. I had a lot of problems with their outdoor units when I had my business, and they would not honor the warranties on a few occasions for reasons that I thought they're the only company that I would openly talk bad about on my show here. I try not to make enemies, but they're the only one that has just on multiple occasions stuck it to me. So not a fan of them. However, I will say their electric furnaces are just fine with that. They were the ones that we would put in. We'd do a Nordyne, like a Miller or Intertherm, which is basically a Nordyne electric furnace. And then just knowing that if something breaks, I might have to honor the warranty, but it's not much to an electric furnace. And then we would do an ADP or Aspen coil, sometimes maybe Mortex, depending on the dimensions. And then we would do a Bosch or a Goodman outdoor unit. So again, very mismatched, very Frankenstein system. But I'd done it so many times that I was like, I know it's going to work great if installed properly, and I'm willing to honor the warranty here, even if it's not necessarily an AHRI match. Randy says it did have a Goodman condenser previously. HL says smaller outfits or go with a manufacturer listed installer. Ooh, that's a good question. My answer has always been clear on this because a lot of folks have different opinions as far as whether it's better or not to go with a large company, small company. I I don't know that there's no way I can say to you, go with a mom and pop business, they're going to treat you great, right? Or go with a large company because they have more employees and they can get to you on a hot summer day on a Saturday easier because they have more employees, right? It's hard for me to say that because I can't guarantee any of that. What I always tell folks is get multiple quotes, get multiple estimates on any projects that you're doing, and then go with whoever gives you the warm fuzzies. And if you haven't gotten the warm fuzzies from someone yet, maybe get a few more quotes. When I help folks on our website, newhvacguide.com, where we will actually chat with folks and help them through the process, that's a lot of times what we're doing. We'll get to talking and they'll tell me what they thought of each company, and ultimately I'll say, I think it's time for you to get some more quotes based on what you're telling me. So that's kind of what my answer would be there. Kevin says, should I be checking the gas pressure on my furnace installs because I don't have a manometer? Please do, Kevin. You're going to extend the life of that system. Because if your pressures are too high, that obviously is a problem. You could be cracking that heat exchanger. I've even seen systems where the gas pressure was so high that it blew a hole through the heat exchanger. So that's not good. And then if your pressures are too low, obviously you're not meeting capacity, but you're also possibly sooting up that heat exchanger and clogging it. So definitely make sure you're getting all that dialed in right. Get a manometer. You can get one pretty inexpensive. And, homeowners, close your ears for a minute. But Kevin, just build it in on a job. Maybe build in half of it on this job and half on another job, but get the right tools there. And that way you can, make sure you're doing that right. Colton says, what are your thoughts on First Company? Their customer service and getting parts from them have been a nightmare for me. No comment, Colton. No comment. Philip says, so the supplier depot that supplies the parts to my installer didn't know they need a special kit for the One Touch with the atmosphere. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, you got to get the one that has the adapter. Yep. And as I said earlier, it's not something we see a whole lot of. So I can't fault them for not knowing that, right? It's not something we do a lot out there, right? It's called the smart thermostat for ductless part, includes a translation adapter. Yes. Yep. Send over a third-party translation kit with a separate Daikin One Touch. Yep. Yep. We've all fought this battle before, pal. The S21 Molex is smaller and the supplier needed to work with Daikin to get the adapter wire harness. Steve says, have you or anyone here had customers complain they didn't save money on utilities and you have to explain there's been a heat wave or cold spell or big increase on utility rates? Yeah, I actually have been dealing with this with another contractor not long ago, and I think there's always that sense of there's this like, and we're all of us heat and air guys have been guilty of this, I feel like, but there's this sense of you're immediately, your walls are up and your sword is out when a customer starts coming to you with a complaint. And what I had to explain to him, I was like, listen, man, let's go over there. Let's go over there and see what's going on. Maybe, just maybe, they're what they're saying is correct. They're not just trying to give you a hard time. And maybe we can go through everything. Let's go through the settings on the thermostat. Let's test it. Let's make sure the heat kit's not coming on prematurely. Let's make sure everything's on the up and up here. Don't just immediately go defensive on them. You may be able to, at the end of the day, end up with a happy customer here if you can just, put that sword down for just a second. Now, if you go over there and try to help them and they've got their sword out, then, sometimes you got to draw it. But that's what I would always tell my guys, put your sword away. Let's go over there. You can still hold your shield. That's the analogy I would always use. But let's see if we can get to the bottom of this. Let's see. HL's talking to Philip there. Ryan, what's up, pal? Good to have you. Timothy Green, welcome to the show. I'm a retired industrial electrician, heavy industry. I now have a heat pump. I have a spare capacitor and contactor. What other spare parts should I have? Ooh, that's a loaded question, pal. Um, that's a very loaded question. The capacitor is probably the one that pops the most on hot summer days, right? Especially folks that are not having that system maintained. Capacitors will fail often. Um, I'm trying to think when we had our service trucks, we always made sure when it was springtime and we were getting closer and closer to the summer, we would always take an inventory on our capacitors. We always kept two thermostats on the truck, one Wi-Fi, one not. Um, we always kept an array of contactors, relays, sequencers. Um, but I think just about anybody would probably have to say that the part we replace the most is the capacitor, at least in the summertime. Um, but if we start getting into the refrigerant loop, now we're talking about a whole nother animal. Refrigerant leaks and parts that go bad and all of that. That's a whole other animal entirely, right? So Philip says originally Supplier Depot sent an air zone not knowing. Yeah, I've seen those. So those are sometimes used in some of the controls with those thermostats. So, but just make sure they sent the right one in your application. So, do you know of any news from Daikin on their cold climate heat pump line? I do, and I can't talk about it. So, but some cool things are coming. I think I'm allowed to say that. Cool, pun intended. There's some stuff coming. I think they've already announced some of their stuff, but I don't want to overstep. But check with your local Daikin dealer on that. I just don't want to say something that would get me in trouble. Because sometimes I get told things and they're like, well, you can't talk about that yet on your YouTube channel. But some cool things are coming. I think I'll just leave it at that. So Philip says, so that's the parts install side of things. What's the difference between the two new Daikin Fit 19 SEER 2 heat pumps, DH7VS and DH6VS? So they have announced at least the 19 SEER 2. So before I get ahead of myself here, let me look up both of those. The DH6 that's the Fit. The DH7, I think that might be that newer Fit that does qualify for some of the things that the original Fit did not. But again, I don't want to overstep here before I say too much. So I'm going to tread lightly on that one, Ryan. And we actually will probably be doing a video on some of the new products very soon. We've got a ductless one coming up. We've already recorded it on some of the new ductless stuff coming. And then there's a really, really cool product. The Otera 115 volt that I think is really cool. It's got some features that is very unique, unique. They are very unique. And then we're going to be doing one on some of the products that you're talking about there. So I'll tread lightly on that before I say something inaccurate. But the DH7 is right there on their website, so it's obviously there. Now, as far as the 19 SEER, I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that. On the model numbers you threw out there. But anyway, we've got a video coming up on that topic to kind of go through everything. Philip says, now for the usage, Daikin One Touch, in my opinion, has a laggy UI. However, when turning on and off the mini split, it was faster than the IR remote. Interesting. That's interesting. How do you test a capacitor? There's a couple ways you can test a capacitor. The easiest way, I think, and the way that I would always teach my trainees is to just kill power and do a microfarad test, and have a meter capable of doing a good microfarad test, testing the capacitance. But there is a way to do it running. There's YouTube videos on that. It's just not something that I was ever, I didn't really want my guys doing it, if I'm being honest. To me, it was a something that they didn't even need to do in most cases. But I had one guy that would do it every now and then just to see what's up. That said, before I move on in our chat here, I did want to make a quick announcement, and that is as a thank you to all of you. We did hit 150,000 subscribers. Next week, next Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, we'll have our show, but it's going to be a very unique show. We will probably be taking less questions live, although I'd love for you guys to still show up and say hello in the chat. However, we're going to have some of our past guests that we've had before, some of the favorites, if you will, some of the ones that you have requested us to have back. And so we're going to have a few of them popping in just as almost like a celebration, a thank you to them. And, for us hitting that milestone. But we're also going to be doing some cool stuff with giving out some cool things. We're going to give out some prizes, if you will. And we did this once before, and it was a lot of fun. So we will be giving out some stuff. Make sure you're here next Tuesday. I've already got a pile of stuff ready to go to give out. So make sure you're here next Tuesday night. I'm not sure how exactly we're going to do all of it yet, but just as a thank you to you guys, just as a genuine appreciation. Hopefully you guys, if nothing else, can get something free out of it. Get a cool prize out of it. So let's see. Philip says Daikin one touch with the atmosphere makes it operate like a dummy AC. It literally turns off and on the unit when the temperature is reached or drops. It should still communicate, unlike some of the other Wi-Fi, unlike a lot of the other mini split thermostats out there, or even your remote. Your remote is not actually communicating. It's just sending a signal and telling that system what you want. And then, so you would think that adding the Daikin 1 would make it more, fully communicating. So that's interesting. Philip says the atmosphere vent vanes use a very noisy servo. So I was able to hear it go off and on when the temperature is reached and dropped. Interesting. I think the atmosphere is like 27 SEER or something like that. It's really high SEER rating compared to a lot of the mini splits out there. Ryan says, Timothy, maybe have an extra float switch wires for burned or shorted wires. Yeah. Not a bad recommendation there. I got the model numbers from the Daikin website. One of the 19 SEER 2 models does not go up to 5 tons, I noticed. Yeah, there's a couple other products that are like that. So good observation there. I wish Daikin can fix this and make the Daikin thermostat behave like the IR remote usage and their older BRC 1E63 wall controller. The BRCs, I think, are usually mostly used for the VRV stuff. So, just a note there. Philip says, congrats on the 150K subs. Thanks, pal. Emery says, can you explain to me how inverter technology works? Well, that's a loaded question. I could probably do a whole show on just that topic alone, but ultimately, inverter, when guys are talking about inverter systems, they're basically talking about a system that can rectify the voltage and then invert that voltage before it goes back into the compressor. And now, why would you want to do that? And ultimately, it gives that system the capability of being able to ramp up and down. So a typical single stage system, imagine a light switch where there's either off or on, right? Off or on, nothing in between. So it's either completely off and not running, or fully wide open running at 100% capacity. A, a two-stage system would be the same thing. So you'd have off, on, and then an in-betweeny. You'd have one in-betweeny that's usually, with most systems, about 70% capacity. Some systems at 65. And then an inverter system would be, off and then a whole lot of in between. There's times when it's ramping up and down, and barely running at times, and still running, keeping the humidity down, uh and the temperature comfortable in there, of course, quieter and all that good stuff. I am not going to say your name correctly, so I'm just going to say M. I have a side discharge heat pump. The fan on outside unit comes on and off periodically, even when my thermostat is off. Yeah, we actually just did a video on this. It's our best performing video we ever did, talking about some of the mistakes. I think it's called the 3 biggest mistakes made in the winter, something like that. And we talk about not covering the unit for that reason, that some, especially inverter systems, they do not want you covering that system because it will turn on periodically to either cool the board, to to cool another component, maybe even thaw the system, whatever the reason it is. But they specifically will say in the instructions, please do not cover this system. And what's funny to me is there's been a bunch of people arguing with me in the comments on that video, and they're like, oh, I've done this for 38 years for my system. Yeah, it's 38 years old. That's why it doesn't have any of the newer technologies. One guy even was like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I think I can read the instructions on a unit, and it says do not cover it. But anyway, that's probably why it's doing that. Make sure that you obviously are keeping it clear and not covering it and all that fun stuff because of that reason. It's most likely turning on periodically to cool that system down. The heat sink, some systems even have a cooling loop on the inverter board itself, literally mounted right to it, meant to keep that board cool, and so on. Philip says, I agree with you on your comment on how the Daikin One Touch should operate, as that's what I expected too. But I hope Daikin is here to see this and get it fixed. Ryan says, Philip, you'll get used to the atmosphere of noises. I know I did with the TV on. It's like it's not there. The only things I disabled was the lights, and follow me sensor motor was loud when moving. Interesting. Ryan says, how do you feel about private equity HVAC companies? Honestly, their whole approach that I see them talk about on YouTube makes me not want to hire them. Surprised they even post their strategies online. Yeah, that is interesting. That they do that. I think business is business at the end of the day. I think as long as they're not doing anything that's harmful to our industry, then, I have no problems with somebody that invests in a business, invests in their employees to make a profit, and then possibly even sell that business if that's what they want to do. Um, you know, as long as they're not hurting our trade in any way, I don't know that I would have anything to say about, their business practices or anything like that. So, you know, all in all, what is the oldest HVAC system you have seen? Good question. I had a system at one time. Now the system was inoperable, so for how long it was inoperable, I don't know. But I had to replace it, and it was from the '60s, and that was probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago. So for it to have lasted that long, whether it was running that long, I don't know, but it was still there. And of course, we replaced it with a new system. So that was probably the oldest one that I can just think of off the top of my head. I had a boiler one time that was almost 100 years old that we worked on. That was kind of cool, and it was still doing its job. It was not pretty. She was old. And I don't think we could have got a part for it if we tried, but that was kind of crazy. Um So, and I don't remember the exact year on that, but I want to say it was like the early 50s, maybe even late 40s, which was crazy. And she was still trucking. So, and that was in operation. Now, how efficient it was, I don't think was, great, but it still worked. It still made the radiators hot in the house. So, yeah, that's probably the oldest one of those. So, yeah, man, I got something in my eye all of a sudden. Yeah, we've had a few videos do well over the last couple weeks. We've had one that's over 400,000 views, and it's a week and a half old, I think. So that's definitely the best video we've ever made. And then we've had a couple others do pretty well as well. So thank you guys for that. That's kind of cool. I've been doing this now coming up on 5 years, making YouTube content, trying to help folks. And it's just kind of cool, to finally see that, see something go not viral, but viral for me was kind of neat. I did have a couple news stories I was going to share with you guys. The chat got to hopping. So while we've got a break here and while you guys are thinking up your next question or whatever, let's hop over to one of these news stories. And let me get my fat face off of here. So let's see. Did it not move over? It sure didn't. It did not move over. I'm still seeing the chat on the screen. Come on now. I guess I'm not going to be able to talk about these news stories. Share. Let's see. Is it going to do it now? There we go. Okay, so this is a story that says tips to keep your HVAC unit safe during ice and snow. And one of you guys were just talking about this a moment ago. And so hopefully this will help some of you folks. This story comes from WKYT, and it looks like they are in Lexington, Kentucky, or at least they are in Kentucky. And so it says, as the snow and temperatures continue to fall, HVAC and plumbing companies are working around the clock to make sure everyone can stay safe and warm. We actually had a company local to us this past week post on their Facebook page, we're not taking any more calls. I'm sorry, but we will not take any more calls from anyone. We are overwhelmed right now. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But it says Fayette Heating and Air says they've received hundreds of calls over the last few days and expect that number to increase throughout the rest of the week. Quote, we're trying to make sure we keep our workforce safe at the same time of trying to take care of our clients' needs, said Kevin Pearl of H2O, Maestro Plumbing and Fayette Heating and Air. Pearl says they have about 120 employees. Whoa, that's a big company who are in the field responding to calls. He says they've come in one after another, but they were already prepared for this. Quote, it's just tricky with the road conditions and more impending weather coming. So far, Pearl says most of their calls have been for busted HVAC systems and generator installations. Quote, when the unit is running nonstop trying to keep up, it's eventually going to wear itself out. Pearl says it's important people know how their home is heated. If your home runs primarily on gas, you don't have to worry as much about the cold impacting your heat. However, if it's run primarily on electric, there is something you should check. Quote, you've got a heat pump that the outdoor unit has to run. So you have to be careful with the snow and ice piling up on it because that restricts it from being able to work properly. Or if you notice that it's icing up when it doesn't have snow and ice on it, that's also a telltale sign that you've got a problem, said Pearl. How long is this article? Okay, we're almost done. Sorry, guys. Pearl says people should also take the time to change their unit's air filters, clear any vents or ducts, and check that their windows and doors are sealed. As for pipes, Pearl says he expects more people to have issues as the week goes on. He says do not use a torch or space heater to thaw them. If it's an emergency, give them a call. Don't use a space heater. Interesting. I can understand why he said torch, but yeah, that's interesting. We see them when the temps get in the 20s, but definitely below 20 for extended periods of time, especially with wind chill. The wind just really pushes the cold air into places it normally wouldn't get to. So yeah. I remember having a working at a company that we had a customer that would put these lights. They were like these, they didn't create a lot of heat, but they were meant for that. You would put them in the crawl space and it would have this light bulb that would warm things up enough to where the pipes wouldn't freeze in the crawl space. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. Philip pointed out the video we were talking about there. Um, let's see. Ryan says, yeah, I'm not against companies making money. They can set their prices and people can accept it or not. It's the way they try to get people to replace systems rather than repair even with small breaks. Yeah, that's not cool. And that's the folks that do hurt our business, right? And especially these guys that get paid on commission. I think that's probably hurt our trade more than anything else. And no offense, if you're a company out there that you do pay your guys based on commission or you get paid on commission, I'm not saying they're all bad, but a lot of them are. If they get paid on commission, they're only worried about what they sell. I remember a company near us that was creating a whole lot of problems for themselves because the salesman, it's his job to sell. His job is not to walk away from a job if it looks like it's going to be a problem, or if that customer seems like they're going to be a problem. You know, I hate to say that, but that's sometimes the case. You meet somebody and you're like, this isn't a fit. We're not vibing. You're already fighting me. And I want happy customers. When they hire me, I want them to be happy that they hired me. Right. And I'm not feeling that love right now. And so maybe this isn't a fit. But when you got a company where the salesman gets paid to sell and that's how he gets paid, or he or she, then they have no motivation to walk away from something that could potentially be a hair pulling out experience, right? Buyer beware, and homeowners have to educate themselves. Yeah, if you sniff that out, I think getting a second opinion is always a good thing, good or bad. Even if you got to pay for it in some cases, might be worth it, right? Philip says, I felt replacing, for my case, help with the power usage, especially now I have a longer warranty and a system that works with solar. Oh, that's neat. Very cool. Annie, welcome to the show. I've had my air ducts replaced. However, when the AC comes on, it blows out cold air before getting hot. Help. So I'm assuming you're saying that the heat, so you have a heat pump, because you're saying when the AC comes on. If you're talking about air conditioning, then please let me know. But if you're talking about heat, if you're talking about the heat pump blows out cold before it gets hot, there are things you can do to alleviate that. So some systems already have something on there called hot start technology, where they will, automatically have that feature where if you call for heat, you'll hear the outdoor unit turn on and then the indoor unit won't turn on until it gets to be a certain temperature. But um sorry, I got a little ADD tonight. I'm reading other comments while I'm trying to answer yours. Um and so I think there's a couple of things you can do. As long as it's keeping temperature in your house, then you could do nothing, right? You can point the ducts to where it's not blowing directly on you. It might turn on and be cold for a bit. And I would say that the majority of folks, especially that have systems that are budget friendly systems, they're not communicating inverter systems. That's not uncommon, right? In fact, in my house, that's how it works. When it first kicks on, if I put my hand over the vent, it might be even a little chilly there. And then as the system continues to warm that coil up, then it gets warm coming out of those vents. So that's the first thing. But the second thing you could do is, I do remember years ago working for a company where they literally added hot start technology to a system. And the way they did it was they actually added a limit switch, a thermal switch, to the circuit for the fan motor. And I forget how they did, because if it was in heat or cool, you would have to change that. But they set it up to where if there was a call for heat, the signal from the thermostat would send to the fan motor to turn on, but the fan motor would not turn on until that coil reached a certain temperature. You'd really have to find somebody that knows what they're doing to wire all that up, because you still want the system to have the ability to control the fan in AC mode. And a lot of furnaces that have that technology, that's all built into the circuit board itself. So you're going to have to really figure out kind of how to wire that, have someone that knows what they're doing, especially, yeah, because you would almost have to wire another relay that would only operate if it got a heat signal, and then that heat signal would then close and allow that relay on the limit switch. I'm just kind of thinking all this out. It could get a little complicated, because you would want that to not be in operation if it was in a cooling mode, if it was getting a call from cooling. So, that's I'd be interested if somebody did come up with a way of easily wiring that up and being able to operate that. I would love to see that. But most systems, it's in the if it has that hot start technology, it's in the programming of the control board itself. So there are mini splits, inverter systems, and even furnaces, where a lot of gas furnaces, it will you'll set up the thermostat, and you'll tell the thermostat that the furnace controls the fan motor in heat mode. So when it calls for heat. Steve says, I bought a portable Medea heat pump, 12 to 14,000 BTUs. It's like having an extra ton and take some work off my regular heat pump. Only costs $300. Interesting. Well, especially if it's efficient, I had an apartment years ago that we were just scraping by, and we used a space heater to warm our little part of the. I think we warmed the kitchen up just enough to keep the pipes from bursting and freezing. But we, back then I had no money. 20 years ago, I was barely getting by. We were living in a 3-bedroom apartment. I had 2 roommates, and it was an interesting time in my life for sure. Let's see. Philip says, I'm not the only one in this case. Larry says, good evening. Hey, Larry, good to see you. Larry's been on our show. Josh, after years of being uncomfortable, I finally have even temperature throughout my house thanks to Cortland from HVAC Technology. Nice. He's representing your area down in Charlotte, right? Representing well. That's great. I'm lucky I found a local HVAC tech on YouTube with proof he knows what he is talking about. Wish everyone had that experience. Yeah, I think it'd be kind of cool if everybody got to kind of see. Wouldn't that be cool? Like if you were about to hire a company, and then every heating and air company had their own scout video. Like I remember in high school when we played football that we had our scout tapes, and when I played, the teams would scout one another. They would spy on one another, almost kind of. They would go to each other's games and record tapes. But then as time's gone on, I think it was just a few years after that, the teams themselves just simply have tapes that they'll just exchange, so they don't have to do all of that, which I thought was interesting. In fact, I think there's a software for it now. But anyway, wouldn't that be cool if heat and air guys had that? I know bidding against some of the companies I used to bid against, I would have liked that. I'd be like, go watch their tape and then watch mine, and you'll see why their price is what it is. Phil says, I have a 3-ton central condenser that can wall mount or pad mount in South Alabama. No snow. Is there a best method for mounting? Ooh, that's a loaded question, Phil. I'm sure there's a lot of different opinions on that. In fact, I bet there's a lot of different opinions in your local area. If you're in South Alabama, I would be curious has it ever flooded there? I know there's parts of Alabama where that might be a concern near the wetlands, swamps, and so on. At least I think Alabama has that. But We have a county in our area where it's literally code now that you have to build the unit a certain amount off the ground. I will say this: if you do a wall mount, make sure that you no flooding. Okay. Make sure that you are doing it in a way to reduce vibration on the house. I have seen that before. If I do a wall mount, I want to be on bricks or concrete. I have hit base plates before. At least I think that's the verbiage, but that plate, that board at the very bottom of a wall. But if I go mounting it further up the wall, we want it to be in a location not near where someone's sleeping because it can vibrate the walls. That is a possibility. It's interesting how many of the large companies in my area on their Google page and their websites have stock images and not their actual work of installs and repairs. I love that you said that. There's this guy. I'm going to do it again. I've done this before with a couple of my friends. There's this guy that I think he's the most famous guy in HVAC. There's actually two guys. Here's one of them. This guy right here. So if all I did was Google HVAC, and then here's the other guy with his hard hat on. Both of them, I think, have hard hats on. Those two guys, I don't know who they are. These pictures are probably 10 years old or more, and they're the most famous guys in the heating and air industry because they are on so many different websites. That guy's probably on 1,000 different websites for heating and air, and he probably knows nothing about heating and air. He's probably just some guy that they took a picture of, for a stock image photo. This guy too, and they've probably never fixed an air conditioner. They might even be models or some sort of somebody that does that sort of thing. And those two guys are the most famous guys in our industry because they're on so many different websites. This guy too, this fella here. In fact, I think there's multiple websites where this guy with the yellow hard hat and this guy are doing work together. In fact, let me click it, see if it comes up. But I've always said that I wonder what the guy's name is. Like if his name is, there they are. Okay, maybe it's a different guy. Red shirt guy there doing work together there. But yeah, those guys are the most famous guys in our trade. And they probably don't even know anything about our trade. You got any last questions before we wrap up the show tonight? Again, next week, make sure you're here. We're going to be giving away some stuff. We're going to be having some of our, just as a celebration, a thank you for hitting the milestone of 150,000 subscribers. We're going to be having some guests on, some of our previous guests, and just as to say hello to everybody and as a thank you to them. And so we're going to have some of them on. And then we're going to have, which Larry, I don't know if you're still on here, but if you're around next week, you've been one of the OGs. You were one of my first guests I think I ever had. But we're going to be giving away some stuff next week, and get your, make sure you're here. Get your last minute questions in here. But before we do wrap up tonight, I do want to say this. We know there's some bad apples out there. We know there's some guys and gals that make us all look bad. If you know somebody that's a good apple, somebody that makes the industry look good, they do good work, and you think that they are a good representation of our trade, make sure, or do me a favor and drop their name in the chat and where they're located. So any good heating and air, electricians, or plumbing companies, any of those, drop them in the chat where they're located. We're going to show them some love. We'll highlight them on the screen, but we also might be able to send them a little more than love. And that is, if someone in your area happens to see your comment, we might be able to send them some business. So drop those names in the chat where they're located, and let's show those folks some love. Steve says, do you need a hard hat to do residential HVAC? I never wore one, but maybe there are certain states that's required. Brian says, congrats. Thanks, pal. Emery says, what do you do about people who hire unlicensed contractors? Well, I don't think you do anything. I mean, I don't know what you could do in some states specifically, but what a lot of homeowners don't know is it can be argued in court that if you do hire someone that's not licensed, that it's on you. So if that unlicensed contractor does something and it ends up, causing harm to you or your home, you have no recourse because you hired someone that's not licensed to do what we do. So that's probably an extreme view, and that's probably only in some states, but I believe that could be argued in court. Other than that, I can tell you, I can really only tell you about Virginia, and best as I can tell, there's no legal recourse for anyone other than our local trade organization can they can make it harder for you to get licensed if they find out you're doing unlicensed work. They can revoke your license if you have one and you've done something you shouldn't, but there's no really legal recourse unless the homeowner sues that person they hired. And I don't even want to call them unlicensed contractor because they're not really a contractor at that point. They're not licensed. So that person that you hired or people that you hired, you're on the hook for that possibly. And so there's usually nothing you can do about it other than complain about them on Better Business Bureau, Google, and then maybe, sue them. But there's no police out there that's going to help you. The Better Business Bureau, they're just going to put some bad stuff on their website about that possible company, but then they'll just change their company name, So at least that's my 2 cents. And based on some things that I have seen, Ryan says super cool HVAC in Charlotte. So shout out to those folks. Gary says, thanks. Great show. I will be on the road next Tuesday. Sorry to miss it, but back in 2 weeks. Travel safe, pal. Travel safe. We do have some days coming up as well that we will not be available on Tuesday nights. I say I. And next Tuesday is one of them. Daggone it. I am so sorry, guys. So it's going to be 2 weeks from now that we'll do that special episode. 2 weeks from now, we'll do the giveaways and the guests and all of that. So, yeah, next week I will not be in town. So that said, we will be back 2 weeks from now. We'll do that special live episode where we'll celebrate the channel, 150,000 subscribers. Thank you to you guys for supporting us. And we'll do some giveaways and say hello to some of our great guests that we've had in the past. That said, I usually say make it a great week. I guess make it a great 2 weeks. And we'll see you then. Take care.